The Galactic Council spires pierced the nebulae choked void like the fingers of ancient gods, each one housing embassies of species. So old their names were carved in the stones of dead worlds. Ships came and went, glowing with propulsion trails of every color physics would allow. But that day, all eyes turned toward a single fleet, humankind's arrival. They did not come in silence. Their ships, angular and armored, bore the scorched remnants of conflict, hulls streaked in red, some metallic oxidation, some not, move in formation like a flock of predators. No banners flew from them. They carried only scars. Commander Alara Voss stood at the edge of her ship's observation deck, arms crossed behind her back. Her armor, still flecked with blood and grime from the last engagement, creaked faintly as she shifted her stance. She hadn't slept in 40 hours. She hadn't needed to. Fury made for excellent fuel. ETA to Council Station. 6 minutes, said Lieutenant Rail, voice taut with something between awe and unease. He adjusted his collar, as if suddenly aware he was wearing a uniform in the company of a legend. Alara didn't respond. She stared at the Council spires as they drew closer, a dozen thoughts winding through her mind like barbed wire. She thought of the colony on Eos 4, where glass ruins now stretched across the plains like bones. She thought of the 6,000 civilians left to die because Council red tape insisted it wasn't their concern, and she thought of the message Earth received 40 hours later, a summons, cloaked in formality, dripping with contempt. Humanity had been invited to the table, and then expected to eat crumbs. The bridge fell quiet. Officers at their stations averted their eyes from the panoramic view, some out of shame, others because they couldn't bear the memories that ships like these dredged up. War left a smell, even in space. Alara finally spoke. Signal the fleet. Weapons offline. Shields holding. Rail blinked. Ma'am, are you sure? They think we're beasts. Let them look us in the eye and still try to call us monsters. Rail hesitated, then nodded and relayed the command. They docked in silence. The Council's hangar was cavernous, glass and gold, banners of every species fluttering in artificial wind. As humanity disembarked, silence greeted them. No dignitaries, no ambassadors, only guards. Rows of tall, silver-armored custodians watched with expressionless helmets as Alara and her escort made their way through the polished halls. No one spoke until they reached the preparation chamber. There, finally, stood someone waiting. Chancellor Varn, a four-armed Osari diplomat whose skin shimmered like obsidian. "You were expected an hour ago," Varn said, nose twitching with disdain. "Human punctuality remains inconsistent." "I arrived when it mattered," Alara replied coolly. Varn gestured to the chamber doors. "The Council is assembling. I suggest you consider your words carefully. There are voices calling for your removal from the Council. Permanently." "I'm aware," she said, then leaned in slightly. "And there are voices who sent ships to bomb our civilians and thought we wouldn't bite back." Varn's mouth curled slightly. Whether it was amusement or annoyance, Alara couldn't tell. "Your paranoia is as charming as your diplomacy. Try not to embarrass your species." He swept away, robes hissing against the floor. Inside the chamber, the rotunda filled slowly. Floating seats, many occupied by creatures that defied conventional geometry. One seat remained vacant, near the center. As Alara approached it, she saw the stairs, some open in hatred, others in fear, a few in curiosity. She did not lower her gaze. If they wanted her to cower, they would be disappointed. Earth's representative seat had no ornamentation, just a tall chair of steel and dark wood, as unadorned as her purpose. She took her place and folded her hands in her lap. Across from her, a gleaming figure rose. Ambassador Haren of the Qatari Dominion, a serpentine being clad in living metal, spoke with the slithering eloquence of practiced contempt. "Let the record show that the human delegation arrives bearing unwashed ships, bloodied armor, and, if our senses are correct, an entire fleet in Council space capable of orbital bombardment." Murmurs stirred like wind in a forest. Alara's voice cut through them. "Let the record also show that we arrived in peace, after defending our people from a coordinated slaughter." The murmurs grew louder. Some protested. Others began listing the council's protocols. Elara stood. You summoned us. We came. And we came not to beg forgiveness for surviving. We came because you wanted answers, and I have them. 6 days ago, a human colony was attacked by ships bearing no markings but equipped with technology registered to 3 council races. We lost 6,000 lives. Civilians, children, teachers, medics, not soldiers. One of the counselors, a feathered diplomat from Etheric Consensus, waved a translucent wing. This has not been confirmed. And even if... Elara raised her voice, not shouting, but with such controlled weight it silenced the room. You knew we were vulnerable. You told us to settle EOS 4. You said it was safe. And when we cried out for help, you whispered among yourselves and sent nothing. The chamber held its breath. Perhaps, she said, pacing slightly now, you believed we would break. Perhaps you wanted to teach the upstart species a lesson. But we didn't break. We bled. And then we answered. We hunted the fleets responsible, and we left their ships adrift. We sent warnings. They ignored them. Counselor Nyrek of the Suvari Collective, glowing softly with bioluminescent veins, floated upward. And now you bring war to our doorstep. No, Elara said, voice dropping like a hammer. We bring memory. So you never forget what silence cost us. That struck deeper than any accusation. Some in the chamber looked away. As the first phase of the session closed, the presiding arbiter, a crystalline being known only as Oratrix, announced a recess. Delegates filed out in murmurs and shadowed glances. Elara remained seated. Rael approached her quietly. That was bold. It wasn't bold, she said. It was true. He handed her a data slate. You should see this. Our scans just confirmed something strange on the fringe of EOS IV's wreckage field. Cloaked debris recently disturbed. She narrowed her eyes. Council ships? Not any we've seen before, but it was meant to be hidden. Elara stood slowly, her armor shifting with her. They knew this would happen. Someone wanted this war. She looked once more to the chamber's great doors. Then let's give them something else entirely. And with that, she turned and walked into the shadows of the corridor, blood-stained and unbroken, as the stars outside kept watching. The chamber pulsed with tension. Elara Voss stood before the assembled council, a solitary human presence encircled by the most ancient powers in the galaxy. The space around her felt cavernous, as if engineered to make her species feel small. Tiered rows of alien representatives loomed from floating platforms, their forms ranging from gaseous clouds wrapped in containment fields to towering insectoids encased in ornate carapace armor. At the chamber's heart, she waited for the verdict of civilizations that once debated whether humans should even be uplifted from their cradle. She wore no ceremonial garb, just the battle-worn command armor that bore the residue of war, blackened plating, claw marks across the shoulder, and a faint streak of dried blood trailing from her collar to her gauntlet. The choice was deliberate. They needed to see what the war had made of them. A sonic chime rang out, subtle but commanding. The presiding speaker, Oratrix of the Kalaria Ray, materialized in a pulse of refracted light. Its crystalline lattice shimmered, like a shattered prism reassembled into sentience. It floated without sound, voice resonating directly in the minds of all present. The council recognizes a human representative. Commander Elara Voss. State your defense. She stepped forward. You call a defense, she said evenly. But I was not summoned here to answer for crimes. I was summoned because humanity fought back, and we won. Murmurs erupted like aftershocks through the chamber. Some hissed in disapproval. Others listened. Elara's gaze swept the tears. EOS 4 was not a military outpost. It was a settlement. Families, children, scientists. You advised us to colonize it, to join this grand experiment of peaceful coexistence. And when the sky fell, when the orbital relays went dark and the soil boiled, no one came. Unverified, hissed Ambassador Threx of the Razek hegemony, his triple-jointed fingers twitching as he rose. We have seen no proof that sanctioned fleets attacked your people. We recovered debris, Elara countered, plasma scoring match Qatari emitters, fragments of Osari alloys, and Razek telemetry signatures. Mixed fleets, unmarked hulls, cloaked transponders, designed to avoid diplomatic trace, designed to provoke us without implicating you. Counselor Nyrek floated closer, veins pulsing violet. Then perhaps Commander, the question is not who attacked you, but why your response was so disproportionate. Illyra's voice sharpened. Disproportionate? You call it that because your species hasn't bled in generations. We don't have the luxury of infinite patience. We buried 6,000 civilians in a single afternoon, and we weren't even given the courtesy of condemnation from this body. She let the silence breathe. Our retaliation was not designed to terrify. It was meant to end a message with a period, not a question mark. From the Qatari delegation, Hiran uncoiled with fluid elegance, his biometal skin rippling. And now you arrive at the council with an armed fleet, blood-stained vessels visible from orbit. Was that message not enough? Illyra took a step forward. Her words landed like falling steel. No, the blood isn't a message to you. It's a reminder to us. She paused, not for effect, but to let the weight of her next words settle. Every scar on those ships is the cost of being unheard. Every streak of red is someone we lost because we believed this council would protect us. We're done being polite guests in a galaxy that locks its doors when we scream. For a moment, the chamber was motionless. Illyra could feel the ripple of discomfort among the delegates. The truth had sharp edges. It cut. From behind her, Lieutenant Rail stepped to the edge of the chamber. His face was pale beneath his dark uniform, but his eyes were steady. He held up a small projector and activated it. A hollow display bloomed in the air above the council, rotating fragments of the ships that attacked EOS 4. Spectral overlays flickered, revealing familiar technologies and schematics. Too familiar. The wreckage, Rail said, voice carrying more weight than his age should have allowed, was traced to multiple council member states. We are not accusing you blindly. We are saying this was orchestrated. Threx barked out a digitized laugh. You suggest the council conspired to provoke war with a species that barely spans one sector? Not the council, Illyra said, but someone among you, someone who thought humans would retaliate blindly, lose control, and justify their extermination. That word cracked the room in half. Extermination. It lingered. Ortrix's glow dimmed slightly. You tread close to claiming conspiracy, Commander. I don't claim it, Illyra said. I intend to prove it. She motioned to Rail, who stepped forward and offered a data crystal to Ortrix's assistant drone. Intercepted communications from a covert relay near the Lorne Rift. Decoded yesterday. Not human. Not Qatari either. It outlines preemptive actions, political engineering. It discusses EOS 4 by name. Attention spread like ice. Delegates whispered through tendrils, telepathy, and pheromones. Ortrix absorbed the data, light patterns dancing across its form. Seconds stretched. Then it spoke again. This requires verification. You will remain within the council precinct until this matter is settled. Illyra nodded. We're not going anywhere. As the chamber recessed, the delegates began to disperse. Some in outrage, others in deep discussion. The seeds of doubt had been planted, and in politics, doubt was more potent than evidence. Back in the human delegation chamber, Illyra removed her gauntlets and sat heavily. Her hands were red and raw beneath them. Rail stood nearby, shifting from foot to foot. You think they'll believe it? He asked. They'll believe what suits them. But now they know we're not as alone as they thought. He hesitated, then added, We intercepted another burst, a private signal bouncing from within the council station. Someone here knew about the attack before it happened. Illyra looked up sharply. Show me. Rail handed her a tablet. The encryption was heavy, but the signature matched one of the delegations still in session. A traitor among them, one with more to lose than humanity ever had. She stared at the screen, then stood slowly. The pieces were moving. The war they were fighting wasn't just in space. It was in the shadows of diplomacy, in whispers between marble pillars, in the subtle reshaping of narratives. Outside the window, the human fleet drifted in silent orbit, motionless but never at peace. Their scars gleamed in the artificial light. Humanity had come to the council bearing wounds. But now, they carried something sharper. Resolve. And someone, somewhere among the stars, had made the mistake of thinking that resolve could be broken. They would learn different. The council precincts did not sleep. Beneath their polished serenity and holographic tapestries of unity, whispers slithered like vapor through the cracks. Suspicion, fear, and now betrayal. Illyra Voss stood before the floor-to-ceiling window of her quarters, watching the stars shift around the council station like patient sentinels. She had barely moved in hours. Her armor remained on, though she'd unclasped the collar and removed the chest plate, revealing the black synthweave beneath. A dark bruise colored her left shoulder, a lingering gift from the orbital assault they'd barely survived. Behind her, Lieutenant Rail's fingers danced across a datapad. We traced the signal's origin. It came from Suite 17 Gamma, assigned to the Drelkin envoy. Illyra turned, frowning. The Drelkins haven't spoken once since we arrived. That's why it's interesting, Rail said, handing over the data. Encrypted tight, but our decryption AI cracked a partial sequence. It references Phase 2 and something called Obsidian Accord. Not in any council registry. She scanned the file. We need access to their quarters. Rail hesitated. We'll be in breach of diplomatic protocol. She met his gaze. We're already standing in the ashes of protocol. If the council won't act, we will. 10 minutes later, they moved silently through the access corridor. Security was light. The council's internal defense systems were designed more for pomp than urgency. No one expected threats to come from within. Suite 17 Gamma loomed ahead. The Drelkin emblem, a jagged spiral embedded in a black disk, marked the door. Illyra signaled Rail. He crouched, pulled a bypass tool from his belt, and attached it to the lock. The light above flickered green. They entered without a sound. The interior was dark, sparse, more like a command outpost than an ambassadorial suite. Strained for a species known for its decadence. A faint hum vibrated through the floor, energy fields hidden beneath the surface. Illyra's instincts flared. She moved toward the central console, Rail covering the doorway. As her gloved hand swept across the interface, holographic files bloomed into view. Project maps, encryption chains, lists of names and ship IDs. One file pulsed and read, Obsidian Accord Contingency Schedule. She opened it. What the hell? She muttered. The file contained directives. Coordinated hits. Not just on humans, but on a dozen species. Colonies across council space marked for sabotage, their locations tagged with orbital insertion paths and withdrawal vectors. It wasn't a human war. It was a destabilization plan. This isn't about us, she said. We were just first. Rail scanned the data. There's a pattern here. The targeted colonies are all newly inducted member worlds. Low defense, high resource yield. Someone wants to fracture the council, Illyra whispered. Force it to collapse into infighting. Create chaos and then what? Replace it. A sound broke her thoughts. Footsteps, soft, measured, approaching fast. She motioned Rail to cover and drew her sidearm. The door slid open. The Drelkin envoy stepped in, tall, cloaked, compound eyes catching the ambient light. But he wasn't alone. Behind him stood a figure Illyra hadn't expected to see again. Ambassador Hiren, of the Qatari Dominion. Hiren's expression didn't change. I wonder how long it would take for you to disobey the rules. Illyra leveled her weapon. You're part of it. Hiren raised one hand, not in surrender, but as though calming a storm. I am not your enemy, Commander Voss, but I am no longer your observer either. The Drelkin envoy stepped forward. She wasn't supposed to find this yet. Rail's voice was steel. Too bad. Illyra didn't lower her weapon. Talk. Now. Hiren exhaled through his gills. The Accord is real. It began as a contingency plan, a network of influence designed to preserve order if the Council became compromised. But when the EOS incident happened, the Accord became something else. Some within it believed the only path forward was to trigger change through conflict. And you let it happen, Illyra said. You let our people die. I didn't order the strike, Hiren replied, stepping closer. But I didn't stop it either. And that is why I'm here. He tapped a small device on his belt. A second later, the room systems blinked, then unlocked. Dozens more files unfolded before them. Logs, recordings, even personal transmissions from military leaders across various races. Hiren had access to everything. The Accord's leadership is fractured, he said. Some believe it should remain in the shadows. Others want open war. I am in between. I don't trust the Council, but I trust chaos even less. Illyra's aim never wavered. You think feeding us scraps of truth makes you an ally? No, Hiren said, but you need allies. And this station will tear itself apart once this data gets out. You want justice. I want survival. That makes us temporarily aligned. Rael looked at her. If this goes public, the Council will burn. There's evidence in here that half a dozen member races had knowledge of EOS IV's vulnerability and did nothing. Let it burn, Illyra said, but the words tasted like ash. If the Council collapsed, who would fill the void? The Accord? Mercenaries? Tyrants? She looked back at the files. Not yet. Hiren's eyes narrowed. What are you suggesting? A controlled leak. Just enough to force an emergency tribunal. We use their own systems. Make them investigate themselves. While they're distracted, we keep digging. And when they find us, the Drokan envoy asked quietly. Illyra holstered her weapon. Then they'll know humanity's not done bleeding. They left the suite under cloak. Hiren vanished down another corridor. Rael walked beside her, silent for once. When they reached the command chamber, Illyra paused. Her reflection caught in the black glass of the door, battle-scarred, unrelenting. Not the diplomat Earth had hoped for, but exactly what the stars had made her. We leak it tonight, she said, and tomorrow we find out who's still on our side. Rael nodded. As they entered the room, the door sealed behind them, locking out the noise of the station. In the darkness, the future of the galaxy balanced on the tip of a bloody blade. The tribunal chamber was colder than before, as if the truth had drawn a breeze from some hidden void. Illyra Voss stood once again at the center, surrounded by ancient eyes, some fearful, some curious, none indifferent now. The data she and Rael had leaked rippled to the Council like plasma across a vacuum hole, undeniable, uncontainable. The Accord existed, and the Council had been compromised. Yet no sanctions had been declared, no arrests made, no war councils convened. Only more talk, more stalling. She'd spent the last 3 days navigating diplomatic quagmires thick with misdirection. Delegates who once scoffed at her presence now treated her like an unstable reactor, dangerous, necessary, but always on the verge of detonation. Across from her stood Counselor Nyrek of the Valari Ascendancy, flanked by 2 aides who whispered constantly, their voices like the rustling of dead leaves. Nyrek regarded Illyra with the calm cruelty of someone convinced of their own superiority. "You understand, Commander Voss," he said, voice smooth as acid, "that the release of stolen intelligence places your delegation in violation of at least 17 clauses of the Council Security Accord." "I understand," she replied, "that your system was already violated long before I got here." Nyrek's tendrils twitched. "So you admit to unauthorized surveillance." Illyra stepped forward. "I admit to doing what none of you would. Protecting people." Oratrix's crystalline form shimmered beside them, more muted than usual. It had not spoken since the leak. Its role as presiding arbiter had been compromised by implication. The Council's supposedly impartial AI consciousness had connections to flagged transmissions. Even it was now under scrutiny. Rael stood at Illyra's side, his expression tight. In his hand, a small device flickered faintly. Another lead. Another whisper conspiracy beneath the formal rot. "They're not listening," he muttered. "They are," Illyra replied without looking at him. "They just don't like what they hear." A sudden silence fell over the chamber. Then a new figure entered, tall, robed in black and silver. Unannounced, uninvited. General Seraph Idrin of the Veiled Dominion. A hush spread like static. Idrin had not set foot in council chambers in decades. Her presence was a statement louder than any declaration of war. Illyra's eyes narrowed. This wasn't in the docket. "It is now," Idrin said. Her voice was gravel and gravity. "The Veil recognized the Accord for what it is. We have reviewed the leaked transmissions. We do not dispute their authenticity. Gasps rippled. Idrin continued. And we now propose the immediate dissolution of the current council body. In its place, an interim tribunal composed of non-aligned species, with full oversight of all council operations. Nyrek erupted. You cannot suggest. I can. Idrin cut him off. And I just did. Chaos bloomed. Delegates shouted across species and languages. Translators scrambling to keep pace. Ilera stood motionless, watching. A new axis had emerged. The veil had taken a side. Rail leaned in. This could work. Or it could fracture everything. Ilera replied. The Accord wants collapse. If the Council shatters now, they'll move in under the guise of rebuilding. Idrin turned to Ilera. Commander Voss, will humanity support this resolution? All eyes fell on her again. She didn't answer immediately. Her mind raced, not with fear, but with consequence. Support the Veil, and Earth might survive, even thrive. But what if the Veil had their own version of the Accord? Another mask, another predator in diplomat's robes. No, she said finally. A ripple of stunned silence followed. Idrin's eyes narrowed. Explain. Ilera took a breath, steadying the fire behind her ribs. Replacing corruption with a vacuum isn't progress. It's a power grab. We've seen what that leads to. She looked around the room. If the Council's failed, it's because it stopped listening to its people, to those on the edges. The miners on Eos 4, the medics on Varela, the children on Hekro's station. We don't need a new council. We need one that remembers who it serves. The words weren't political. They were personal, and they hit harder because of it. Idrin said nothing for a moment. Then she nodded, almost imperceptibly, not in agreement, but in recognition. You've grown, Voss. Ilera's voice stayed level. We had to. After Idrin's departure, the chamber recessed into closed session. Ilera and Rail returned to the delegation chambers. Their security details, small but fierce, stood ready. Rail collapsed into a chair. I can't believe you turned down the Dominion's offer. I didn't, Ilera said. I postponed it. She turned toward the window. Earth was just a point of light from here, too distant to see, but she could feel it all the same. We're not here to pick new rulers. We're here to stop the killing. The Accord isn't dead yet. We still don't know who's really pulling the strings. Rail held up the device again. About that, we intercepted another pulse. Traced it to one of the comm relays in the lower decks. Not council registered. She arched an eyebrow. A ghost node. He nodded. Encrypted with an old human defense core cipher. One we stopped using after the Martian rebellion. Someone's hiding in our skin, she said. Rail stood. Want to pay the visit? Ilera nodded. Gear up. As they left the chamber, the lights dimmed behind them. Shadows swallowing the empty seats. The council was cracking. The galaxy was listening. And somewhere below them, the real architects of the Accord were still whispering. The war hadn't ended. It had only just found its voice.